Welcome to the webinar. You have entered as an attendee in listen-only mode.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the UBC Climate Resilience webinar. So today we will have Esther Kreutz from UBC Sustainable Cities to present the CASCADE project. Then we will have the city case examples. We will have Marek Muiste from Tartu Regional Energy Agency about sustainable city Tartu. And then we'll have Tiina Vikman from City of Turku talking about City of Turku, carbon neutrality and climate positive thereafter. And finally, we'll be having Shirin Reuvers from CDP with her presentation on who's tackling urban water challenges. So let's get started. So welcome on behalf of the Union of Baltic Cities Sustainable Cities Commission. I am Kristiina Paju. I work here as a project planner, and I will be hosting and moderating this webinar today. So UBC is a city network founded in 1991, and it comprises of about 70 cities from the 10 Baltic and Nordic countries all around the Baltic Sea, and we will have 7 commissions, and our Sustainable Cities Commission is one of them. So our commission is guided by the strategies for smart sustainable development, and we have created a UBC Sustainability Action Program 2016 to 2021, which gives strategic direction to the realization of our vision of the Baltic cities in the future. So we are trying to create smart, safe, and sustainable Baltic Sea region. And the commission itself, where we're working right now, is in the city of Turku. And it has been hosted by the city of Turku already since 1997. And our main goal is to make UBC cities climate change leaders in Europe and globally to initiate and implement climate smart urban development. That includes climate smart sustainable districts, mobility models, energy efficient transport, building planning, and so forth. Our focus areas include sustainability management, climate work, water related issues, sustainable urban mobility and planning, as well as maritime and port strategies. And we are mainly working through projects. In 2019, we are having projects in the 4 categories: water management, we have BSR water platform, and Turku region water sector concept. From the urban mobility section, we are working with Civitas Eccentric, Sumps Up, Cities Multimodal, and Hub Mobile. When it comes to resource efficiency, we have Energy Smart Cities ECAT project, Ekotuki, and Kierrätysjärjestelmä, which are mostly based in Finland. And on climate resilience, we have newly kicked off project called CASCADE, of which you will be hearing in a moment. And before we start, after each presentation, there will be a slot for your questions. So please write them under the questions panel, and we will then have a couple of minutes of time to let our panelists to answer your questions if you have some. And if you would like to use your microphone, please use the raise your hand function so we can see that you would like to ask in person instead of us reading your question out from the chat box. And there will be polls coming up during the webinar, so be prepared. And one more important notion, that this webinar will be recorded for your convenience from later on, and so that we can distribute to our network later. And yes, so sorry for my babbling. I will put on the first poll right now that would ask, what kind of organization do you represent? So we will get an overview where you're coming from today. So there you go. Okay, we will wait for a little more. There's 60% of you have voted. A couple more seconds. Go and vote if you haven't yet. Okay. I will share you the poll results. So 43% of you are representing a city today. 29% comes from the business sector. We'll have NGOs present, and we also have educational research facilities. Welcome. So a few words about climate resilience as well, in order for us to understand what we will be talking about today. So the concept itself describes the ability to anticipate, prepare for, and respond to hazardous events, trends, or disturbances related to climate. So all kinds of risks that might affect the well-being of your cities, urban communities, and the ability to bounce back from the external or internal stressors. So this is what we'll be talking about. And in the cities, often the plans or strategies are involved in specific resilience strategies or sustainable energy and climate action plans that are called SECAPs and that are coordinated by the Commandant of Mayors. Or then there might be some other kind of action plans that take this aspect into attention. So without further introduction, let me introduce you to Esther Kreutz, our project coordinator, and she will give you a short presentation about the CASCADE project. Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Kristiina. I'll just put my presentation on a second. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Also from my behalf, oops, sorry. Do I now have my?
Yes.
Now you see the screen.
Yes.
I hope.
Perfect.
Okay. One more time. Good morning. Yeah, my name is Esther Kreutz. I work as a project coordinator at the UBC Sustainable Cities Commission, but I'm actually today replacing my colleague Nupu Ervasti, who is colleague of ours and who is actually working in CASCADE with the communications, but I'm replacing her today. So CASCADE is one of our recent projects that has started in January this year. And it's for us a rather different kind of projects than we usually do in different aspects. First of all, it's for us a completely new, it's a new area and a new funding instrument, as this project is funded by the European Commission and the Direct General of ECHO under the Union Civil Protection Mechanism on Prevention and Preparedness Project in Civil Protection and Marine Pollution. We have worked a lot with climate change and with climate change management in cities and local authorities, but the new thing for us is to work on this conjunction between climate change and civil protection. It's a short project, it's 24 months, and as I just said, so the difference is that actually also this is not only focused on local authorities, but this project is led by the Southwest Finland Rescue and Emergency Services. So of course they are anchored in local authorities, but the main actors are the civil protection actors. On the list of our partners that you can see here, you can see we have we are covering quite a lot of countries in the Baltic Sea region, and we also have quite a variety of different actors. We have the Council of the Baltic Sea State as a regional policy level body. We have a national civil contingency agency from Sweden. Then we have the different actors in civil protection from Poland, from Hamburg and Frederiksborg. Then we have a research partner from the Stockholm Environment Institute from Tallinn. And then we have 2 of our UBC commissions and the Åbo Academy University here from Turku as our academic partner. So this is a very, it's a very interesting consortium. It's a bit different target group than we usually have in our projects, but we're really happy to have this project finally started because it covers a very, very important topic. And now, I'm sorry, now my presentation doesn't move. No, it did. Okay, sorry. Yeah, but probably you wonder, so what do we actually want to do in this project and why am I talking about this all the time, that this is so special? Well, for us it's special, and in general I think it's a very important project because it tries to bridge the gap between climate change actors that we usually work with. That means often with the people working in environmental departments, in local authorities, etc., and the civil protection actors. So the civil protection actors like firefighters or the police or other kind of civil protection actors who actually have to or are on the forefront when climate change effects hit a city, for example, when there are floods, when there are storms, those that have to do the actual work and protect citizens and cities and infrastructure, etc. So and the project was born from the fact that there is this gap between this awareness of climate change effects and climate change adaptation or among the civil protection actors. So why we do this project? We want to increase this connection, the connection between the different sectors and also the connection between local and national level civil protection authorities. It's, as I said, it's only a short project, it's only 2 years, but still our aim is to increase this increase the capacity or improve the capacity to understand and assess and treat the current and future climate change related risks on the local level, and especially here in our region. And that's why we do it together, because we all relate to the same region and face the same challenges and same risks. Furthermore, CASCADE wants to increase the risk management capabilities of local authorities, and through a training program that is developed, we want to enhance the capacities of the urban communities. So as outcomes of the project, in the very end, we will have an online tool for integrated climate change and disaster risk reduction management in urban contexts here in the region. But this will be really the outcome at the very end, where all of our other outcomes will feed into. Right now, our partners develop already a guideline for integrated climate change and disaster risk reduction management in cooperation. Then this guideline will feed into development of training courses for what we call now first the train-the-trainer approach, to then have those trainers doing training locally to have this multiplying effect. And apart from this capacity building activities, we have a strong focus on policy dialogues and the policy level between the cooperation between local, national, regional and international actors on policy level to develop recommendations and to increase the policy coherency in this field in the Baltic Sea region, climate change, security, and so that these policy fields are no longer kind of dealt separately with. As I said, we are still in the beginning, so there's a lot of things will come up and a lot of information will come out soon. So you can so far follow our UBC website for more information. Our CASCADE website will be launched during the next months, and also this will be announced there. Otherwise, if you have any question about the project, you're really welcome to contact either the project manager or then my colleague here at UBC, who is doing our communications, if you have any questions about the project. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Esther, for an interesting presentation. It's a very important project, and we hope that it will help to create the change and make our cities more resilient to climate change. So now we are on to our next speaker. We will have Mr. Marek Muiste joining us from city of Tartu. All right. If you can unmute yourself, still we can hear you. There you go. Now we should be able to hear you.
Hey. So welcome also from my side. I will just open the presentation. Yeah. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it. You can start.
Great. So it's a little bit weird experience for me to speak with the computer. Usually I speak with more people in the room. Right now I'm just alone in our communication room. But yeah, we can handle. So my presentation is focusing on the process rather than the project. These activities are financed by different local, national, and European initiatives. If we have time at the end of the presentation, we can shortly talk about also the project side of the things. But I would like to use this very good opportunity to talk about the process of one city in Estonia moving towards the sustainability. And we will discuss several dimensions of this process, and all of these are right now very relevant because we are composing putting together a strategy for a sustainable future. This is a new energy plan that we are doing with integrated methodology, combining all those different aspects. And unfortunately, because of the time limits, I'm not able to cover all the aspects of the sustainability. I'm focusing on some of the more distinctive ones that could resonate with the situation in your communities also. So that was the logic in putting this presentation together. And I would like to start with a short question about what are the challenges of sustainability in your mind today. So if we can do the poll, please. So the main dimensions here are mentioning are consumerism, insufficient infrastructure and insufficient services, outdated legislation and global failures, inequity and social tensions, and also a wider social sort of background of the sustainability movement. And finally, political instability and lack of political responsibility among the leadership. So which ones are, in your mind, the most relevant?
Okay, so we have 67% of you already submitting your vote. We'll wait for a couple seconds more. and then we'll show the results. So quickly, if you haven't answered yet, take your chance. Okay, now we have 75%. Okay, let's see. There's the results now. So 33% of you indicated outdated legislation and global failures. None of you indicated inequity and social tension, which is interesting, but all the other three responses got equal amount of votes, 22% each. So it's quite balanced.
So the outdated legislation and global failures is the leader of this poll right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we are thinking quite globally, and in many days of the week, I feel the same. It's my background is in energy engineering. I was trained as an engineer, as a technical expert. Now I've been moving towards more of the development world and consultancy, and I also work with the students I teach in our local University of Applied Sciences, and this global resonance. This is what we feel in our work quite daily. So how can I go back to my? This is something that I have to do from my side to go back to my presentation.
Yes, you have to go back to your right place. There you go.
Yeah. So I'm coming from Tartu, Estonia. I'm working for a regional energy agency here, and I've been dealing with sustainability issues for the local communities for more than 10 years for now. And just to give you a little sort of background of what is happening in the world at the time when we are working on the sustainability issues. We have these big topics that are so much more important. Like if we are talking about things that are happening in the media or in the communication systems, in the social networks, there are big topics of that are so relevant and have such a huge coverage in global media. So the question of the sustainability is somewhere a little bit pushed aside in many cases, and I call this space, this area that these topics inhabit, the pockets of sustainable innovation. And this is just a brief background. We will come back to this at the end of the presentation also for additional info. But please also, this is a little reality check. This is what people are thinking when we try to convince them that they should buy an electric car or change to solar power. So some of the specific challenges that I have faced and I have sort of collected over the years working in the field of sustainable energy development. First of all, whenever we are providing new ideas or innovative ideas about how the society should consume energy or how it should be more efficient or more sustainable, these messages are always competing with some other messages. And what we see all the time is that these other messages are, they have much stronger presence in the media, usually compared with the ideas of sustainability. And because of this everlasting presence, I'm calling these competing ideas almost like spells. So it's almost, I have to use almost the language of the Harry Potter here and witchcraft. These are the huge messages that are able to that are so loaded that they are able to switch people on and off much more effectively compared with the ideas of sustainability. Of course, what we see, especially in Eastern Europe, because we are in many ways in a developing stage, we see huge peer pressure from more developed Western countries that have the idea of the consumption, the idea of that we should consume, and this is how the economy is working. So, and this is something that we have been looking, up towards for last 25 years. Dreaming about the day when we can buy the same amount of cars and have the same amount of personal space or housing for ourselves as people in Germany or in France or in the United States of America. And this is very interesting because this brings us to the next challenge, which is sometimes we almost feel that we have this right to consume, and this is something that's quite difficult to face, because if people are feeling that consumption is somehow their universal right, part of the human rights package, which it isn't, but in many ways people feel this way, then it's very difficult to approach them with the message that we should somehow consume less, because this generates automatically a negative response. That what do you mean consume less? We have the right to consume. This is how the modern world is functioning. And of course, this right to consume attitude, it has a wider background in the social norms, and specifically what I call me versus us dilemma, which is that especially in the developing societies, the roles between the individual and the community, or individual and the collective, are not fixed as they are in older democracies, but they are negotiable. So I can take a little bit more rights to myself when I see the opportunity, and I have no moral sort of problems with that. I can feel that I should have a parking space in front of my window. And I don't care if children want to play there. I have the right to have my car, in front of my bedroom window. So these kind of attitudes, they can again enforce this right to consume mentality that makes the world of sustainability a little bit harder to communicate for the people. And of course, then we have the structural problems, structural challenges that the whole Europe is in a way facing, that the infrastructure of the energy systems, transportation systems, etc., is old and getting older and older. It's in many ways from the era of the second part of the 20th century, where it was an economic boom and sort of building boom all over Europe, also in Soviet Union, and now we have to sort of live with those developments, right? We have to live inside those environments, and it's the built-in sort of energy consumption that that is forcing us in a way to consume more than would be in more efficient environments. Insufficient national frameworks is part of that story, especially in the eastern part of Europe, where you really have a indicator of the social development that at least I can find useful, is that how much government is able to pull through the huge infrastructure investments and how well they can be managed. Because this requires, and this is something that where technology meets the social issues and leadership questions, the ability to manage big investment projects without big failures, without corruption, without huge social backlash. This can be really seen as an indicator of effective government, and not all the Eastern European countries have that. And of course, we have energy poverty and wider poverty and social challenges that is quite visible. So some of the background of the country: we are one of the most carbon-intensive countries in Europe. Despite our small size, we have the most carbon-intensive electricity production in Europe. And overall energy budget, 70%, even a little bit more of energy comes from non-renewable sources. So we are quite carbon heavy. We are producing about 15 tons CO2 per capita, per person, and with that number we are third in Europe, and about almost 1,000 tons of CO2 for 1 million euros of GPT. This puts us in the second position of most energy intensive economies. Sorry, CO2 intensive economies. And in energy intensity, we are also in the second place in Europe. So we have this sort of national framework that is no way sustainable in modern terms, right? It's wasteful. It's carbon heavy. It has very sort of visible social and environmental problems in some of the regions of our country. So what can we do about it? How can we develop our sustainable city inside of that framework? So that's really the big question here. What we see us is that we are leading the wider sort of energy transition process, transition towards low carbon economy in Estonia, because we have implemented the measures to reduce the carbon emissions in our region. We have higher share of renewables in our consumption, and we are growing that steadily. So right now, our sustainable energy production is based on small cogeneration power plant, about 100 megawatts. And we are supporting that with the new developments, planning out and installing small PV plants all over the city. And right now we also have planned to develop a large scale solar power plant near the city with the installed capacity of 50 megawatts of PV panels. Right. So this is really something that we are doing despite the sort of national background, and it's this sort of opposition almost with the national targets and national activities makes our life a little bit more interesting, I would say, but also it has its own specific challenges. I don't want to go into that topic too much today, but this is one of the areas how the municipalities today can improve their sustainability over the wider environment where they're situated. So I would like to go on with the mobility questions. This is something that is maybe the biggest challenge for us. This is something that mobility is something that we cannot be so proud of, and we cannot say that we are leading the energy transition in that area. Our car ownership has increased tremendously over the last 15 years. This increase has been constant, and it's very difficult for us to turn the tide back. It's related with the wider national background. We see Estonia as not very densely populated country. We see our people moving very actively between the cities and between the regions. We are also seeing our people favoring at least some kind of rural experience, either the country house or some relatives living in a countryside. So there is a constant sort of commuting between our city and the sort of wider rural background, rural area. So, and this is combined with the wider trends in urban development. We have very big area of urban sprawl around the city for today, and we have several large shopping malls and shopping centers near the city border that are increasing the demand for the transportation. And we see at the same time that the process of losing the public transportation opportunities even further, especially in the rural areas of the country. So if you want to leave, basically, if you want to leave that life where you have work in a city and country house, somewhere in a rural area, you almost have to have a personal car to make that happening. And of course, this all adds up to the transportation situation in the city of Tartu. What we see also as one of the major problems is that the transportation system is very sort of focused on the strong people. It's not so much helping the people with disabilities, or helping elderly move around, or helping children, or women with children, or parents with children. It's not. It's helping wealthy, I would say 40-year-old successful men to move around in the city, out of the city, back to the countryside, back to the city. So it's very sort of, I would say that our transportation system is very much having the the face of the people who are actually planning the system. And winter maintenance also adds to the problem, especially for the people who do not, don't have that very sort of powerful ability to go anywhere, anytime. So this is also a huge challenge for us. So what can we do? First of all, we have taken a priority to focus on the active modes of transportation, cycling and walking. We are also constantly increasing the quality of the public transportation services. The infrastructure itself, the bus routes and buses and all the sort of visible elements, they are quite modern. So it's we have a new fleet with the highest, not the highest anymore, but quite high environmental emission levels, etc. And in the regional area or sub-regional area, we have public transportation free of charge. So you don't need to have money to go to the countryside with the public transportation if you have the connection. And we are also moving further, implementing city bike services. This will come in the summer of 2019. Also in electric bicycles, and we are widening the electric car public charging networks with the rapid chargers. So to go on with the sustainable housing, we have our challenge is the big fleet of Soviet-era housing. 72% of all apartments in Estonia are in this type of buildings, with the energy performance standards that are not really up to date. These buildings are wasting energy. They don't have good indoor climate, and they are, in terms of the living environment, they are not the best places to live. But the refurbishment is expensive. It's and also not many people understand the need of the renovation. So this is also related with the fact that we are, in a way, aging community, and yeah, not many older people want to make the 20-year investments for full refurbishment of the buildings. There are national grants that can help. Right now, at this moment, none of these are available, but they open and close. So it's possibility to use, and this is what we have trying to do in our case, to encourage the people in our community and in our city to go to those grant schemes and use the EU money or national money to use that money to renovate the buildings. What we can also do, and what we do in our side, is we are providing pilot renovations that go beyond the required minimum of energy performance, that are performing better, to show that it's possible and it's doable, and encourage people to do so. One of the last topics today, I would like to say a few words about the circular economy, which is maybe mostly related with this global background that we started our discussion today. We are very bad with the waste, and there are several reasons for that. one of them is that we have to learn very fast. I mean, historically, we haven't had such a huge amount of materials, goods, and things flowing into our community and changing to be a waste few years after. This is what we call the consumption cycle, and this cycle from when you go to the shop and buy new refrigerator or buy new furniture or computer or smartphone, and the day when you throw that out to the garbage, this cycle, this time period is getting shorter and shorter, which means that we are increasingly pumping goods and materials through our consumption system. And of course, the things don't disappear just because we ending up using them. They will end up somewhere, and in worst case, they will end up in nature, as a waste or as a pollution even. So this is something we want to face more in the future. There are some things that we can do. We can reuse things. We can repair things. We don't have to throw away things that are broken. We can repair them. We can hack them. And I told about this a little bit later. And we can recycle. We can recycle materials, or we can recycle components. We can take things apart and put it together without destroying 95% of the materials that usually happens when we recycle materials. This is the sad truth of recycling. So what I mean by hacking, one of the trends that we see, and this is global, this has nothing to do with us or our attention, is something that is called planet obsolescence. And this is really what it really is companies getting into this fast consumption cycle, saying that, all right, if people don't want to use the things that we produce, if people don't want to use them more than 1 year, we shouldn't make them lasting more than 1 year, right? And if you do that, like if you put products on the market that won't last more than 1 year, of course, it's very difficult to even use them longer. But there are ways to do that, and this is how people are hacking. The most prominent example is maybe the smartphones, the expensive smartphones, for example, that Apple is producing, that have battery built into the machine itself or device itself. So there's no way how to change the battery as a consumer. And this type of batteries, they have the life cycle of 2 years, usually less. After the first year, you start to see your phone slowing down. So what do? You either go to the shop and buy the new one and throw the old one out, or you go to the guy who is good with tools, basically who is hacker, and who opens the device and puts new battery in. And this is what you can do also now in Apple. But this opportunity is for us there because people started to do that without the consent of Apple, and Apple just gated that demand back to their shops and basically providing good service. But this is with many things. Basically, the regulation of the production these days is getting stricter and stricter, and we are coming into the point where basically almost all the attempts to repair something legally is hacking. It's not encouraged by the producers, by the companies who are producing those things, and community has to find their own way how to deal with. This is very much electronic based activity, but you can do very interesting things also with the furniture or with the construction materials if you're willing to. And the second thing that we try to do, almost as an opposition of the global trends, is to encourage the local sort of sustainable production modes for local food, of course, which is, I think, the most relevant for every one of us. We want to have good local food because it's healthy and good for us. But also for material industry, we are very fond of timber as a material. So this is what we also try to encourage in our region. Product development, we have established an open workshop, a makerspace in our community where people can come and develop their own or build their own products, etc. And this a little bit brings us back to the this idea of pockets of sustainable innovation. That sustainability almost is a sort of little bit underground activity that or a little bit restricted with the global trends, that you have to provide the possibilities, but it will happen somehow under the radar of the big things. So to conclude, we are developing a integrated energy plan that will include all those aspects that we just discussed about, and this will be called Tartu Energy 2030 Plus, and we are implementing several sort of modern concepts of the planning, integrated planning, and also we are implementing sustainable energy and climate action plan methodology that is provided by the Covenant of Mayors. We are also part of the Covenant of Mayors starting 2014. We have existing sustainable energy action plan, and now we are sort of widening the scope, including the relevance of climate action plan, and our main topics will be data, climate, energy, transport, buildings, and governance. We are also focusing on public engagement, and we are providing a platform for third parties to make their own agreements, supporting the plan in municipality. The non-governmental or private sector, they can come up with their own long-term emission agreements to say that we will help to municipality to become more sustainable by doing these things. And one of the ideas that we are adding to sort of standard planning procedure is the idea of the forerunners. So for the as one of the ideas we want to implement is the idea of the forerunners that are locally active people or organizations who already implementing the sustainable practices in their work or in their everyday life, and who are happy to share their experiences. So these people, the people who are already using electric cars or installing PV panels to their houses, or promoting active modes of transportation, using bicycles or just walking, they are immensely usable source of insight how these new concepts and new ideas can be implemented in real life. What kind of challenges there are? What can we do right and what can we do wrong? So what we try to do is to include these people in our processes, in our planning procedures, to give them a voice to share their experiences and to inspire the community around them to use, implement the same ideas or the same technologies. And also, it's very important. Not only we need their help, but forerunners also need our help. So when we are talking about, again, when we are talking about these pockets of sustainable innovation, every one of these is, consists these forerunners, is based on the activities of these forerunners. And usually they need support to grow and to overtake the big topics. They need, if they are service providers, they need people to buy their services. If they are advocacy organizations, they need better tools or platforms to promote their advocacy messages. When they're selling something, they need clients. So this is what we also suggest, that if you're having public budget, if we need to buy things, let's buy from the forerunners. Let's buy from the people and from the organizations who are actually implementing that money that we give them back to the sustainability, back to the sustainable business that they are building, or back to the everyday work, paying the salaries of the people. So that's little. I'm sorry, I probably went over the time limit of any here, but that's just a fraction of the things that we are working in a framework of our new integrated energy and climate plan. If you have any further questions, please send me a short email and let's be in touch, and I can share more information with you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Marek. And we have one question for you regarding meat and other animal production consumption. Ruta is indicating that it is now finally finding its way to the stages where sustainability is discussed, and in some studies this appears to be an even bigger contributor to greenhouse gas emissions than transportation and energy. And why do you think this is not on the main topic list? And why is it so hard to put this on the table of discussions?
Okay, so this is something that I'm struggling myself. Also, I'm not a big fan of the meat products. It's one of the topics that definitely will end up in our plan, and I've been in contact with Tallinn, city of Tallinn. They are preparing also their energy and climate plan, and we also have discussed with Tallinn to add that topic into their agenda. And it's, I see two dimensions here. One is what is, I think, very correctly mentioned in the question, which is the energy footprint of the meat production, which usually, like if we generalize, is 10 times higher than non-meat production modes. So if you have, one of the analogies that we are using is that if you have products that are, 10% of their weight is CO2. Let's say you have a lump of bread which weighs 1 kilogram. Roughly, 100 grams of CO2 is produced when you produce lump of bread. With the meat products, you have 1-to-1 relationship and above. You can have 1-to-10 relationship and higher. So the energy cost is 10 times compared with non-meat products. But the message, how we can communicate to that community, to the communities, is very difficult. I mean, people have to be ready to that discussion. But there is this other dimension, which is the cruelty and inhuman way these animals are treated, and this has to stop. There should be no discussion about this, how these animals are transported and how these animals are kept in their facilities and how these animals are killed. So these are the things that absolutely, without no discussion, has to change.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And we will now move on to Tiina from Turku, so we can hear what they are doing over there. But biggest thanks to Marek that you could join us and share with us Tartu's plans.
All right, so let's go. Hi, everyone. My name is Tiina, and I come from the city of Turku in southwestern Finland. Thank you, Esther and Marek and Kristiina, for the good presentation so far. It was really interesting to hear everything so far. And I will tell a bit about the city of Turku's climate targets and what we have ongoing right now here in the city of Turku in southwestern Finland. So I work in the central administration of the city of Turku, and we have a small climate team here managing and coordinating the climate strategy and the climate plan that we have approved last year in the city council. So let's see. So I will tell you shortly about our objective to become carbon neutral by 2029. And we also have an objective to become climate positive thereafter. And I will just tell you shortly about what that means and what it practically might mean for us. And just those two objectives in mind, I will also tell you Turku's most important climate plan entities in a short nutshell, since we don't have too much time here. And then I will tell you a bit about our climate resilience and adaptation project in Turku, because we have a risk and vulnerability assessment that has been made last year, some results regarding that. Okay, so Turku has the objective of becoming carbon neutral by 2029. And the City Council in Turku has approved this objective unanimously last April, so almost 1 year ago. And we analyzed our possibilities of setting a more ambitious climate goal. And before this 2029 goal, our goal was set on 2040, actually. But we decided to patch things up a bit and take the carbon neutral goal a bit closer in time, because we analyzed it and it came up that it is actually technically possible to be carbon neutral in 2029. And well, the political will behind this is strong because the city council, as I said, approved this unanimously. So in April, we decided on a city strategy that includes this objective. And well, a net zero carbon footprint, and our emissions are only as high as the amount we can offset or bind. And you might wonder why 2029? Why not 2030? Because that's the usual goal year that the cities or organizations set for their carbon neutrality. Well, Turku has a very special anniversary in 2029. Our beloved city turns 800 years old, and well, the city council decided that what better way to celebrate the year than by becoming carbon neutral. So that's the background behind this year. But then we have approved our climate plan in the city council in last June, and this climate plan includes an objective to become climate positive from 2029 onwards. So, well, carbon neutrality is only one milestone on the way towards a long-term sustainable lifestyle in a city, and we decided that we need a long-term objective to go with this carbon neutrality objective. So climate positive or a carbon negative city area takes this kind of a long-term view, in, if you could say that. So this is the challenge, but in order to achieve something great, we decided to set our goals as high as possible. And probably you already know this, but just to make it clear, a climate positive or a carbon negative city means that our net effect on the climate is removing carbon dioxide from the air instead of adding any, or even having a net zero effect. So we have a negative net effect on climate. So in practice, it means that our offset and carbon binds need to be higher than our emissions. Quite a challenge, but we are positive that we will accomplish this. And if I may, we could take the first question in my poll. I had many questions, but I will just take one of them actually, because we are a bit short on time. So if it's possible to
Yes, so it's the question about the goal, right?
Yes, has the city, your city, or since there are organizations and business sector here as well, has your city or organization set a goal to reduce its carbon emissions?
Yes.
And there are some alternatives, just to have a quick view about what the attendees here.
Okay, so now the voting has started. Please select which applies to your city.
Will be interesting to see.
So we have 64% of you, now 73. Let's wait a bit more. Can we reach 80%?
We don't need many for that, so so good.
Just a few seconds to submit your answer. Okay, so if there's no more coming, let's close it and we'll share the results with you in a moment.
Yeah.
So there you go. As you can see from the results, 50% have set a goal and measures have been prepared and decided on. That's wonderful. 25% answered yes, but measures have not yet been prepared. Nobody answered no, but we are preparing to set a goal. We are not preparing. Okay, that's interesting. And we are not preparing to set a goal.
How many percent was that? I have such a small
25.
screen here. That
25%.
Okay, interesting. So there's quite a variety of different situations in, but of course now we don't have the data about which ones are cities. But anyway, this is interesting. Thank you for your answers. So I will tell you a bit about the Sustainable Energy and Climate Action Plan, the SECAP, that we have prepared, that the City Council approved in June 2018. So that's the SECAP that aims for a carbon neutral Turku in 2029. So we have the overall objective of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by a minimum of 80% compared to the 1990 level, and then the rest will be compensated or binded. So then we also have some milestones along the way, milestone objectives along the way. So already in 2021, our city area has the aim of reducing our emissions by 50% from the 1990 level. In a short while, I will tell you what the situation is right now. But then in 2029, we have a reduction, hopefully have a reduction of already 65 to 70% from the 1990 level. And then finally, by 2029, we have reached carbon neutrality and we have the minimum of 80% compared to the 1990 level and compensating for any remaining emissions left. So that's the scope that we have here right now. And also these milestone objectives go in accordance with the city council terms, so in Finland. So that's also one important aspect in our work. And this has, of course, throughout the way been prepared in accordance with the EU model, with the SECAP model. So here's a short introduction to what our greenhouse gas emissions, how they are divided right now, or not right now per se, but according to our latest numbers that we got, and this is by sector in 2017 using a Finnish CO2 report method. So there's a CO2 report that our city reports to and that we order our emission reporting from. So this is from that source. Well, just to sum this pie up a bit. So 2/3 of our emissions generate from energy, the energy system in its entirety, electricity, district heat, separate heating, industry and machinery, so on. So that's of course our most important sector to tackle. But our emissions in transport take up for 1/4 to 1/5 of our emissions. And that's actually an even more challenging sector for us to tackle because, well, we have made quite significant investments in energy and transitioning to low carbon energy already. And in transport, we have many very successful and good projects ongoing, and we have very good measures ongoing, but every citizen in Turku anyway choose every day how they go to work or go to school or whatever. So actually our scenario is that in 2029, of course, this pie and these sectors will look very different. So transport in its entirety will take up probably about 50% of this pie in 2029. So maybe to give a perspective of what kind of a challenge we are tackling with this transport sector here. And as I told you, I promised to tell you a bit about what our situation is right now and how we have managed to tackle our emissions so far. So according to our latest number, we have managed to reduce our emissions in their entirety almost 1/3 from the 1990 level, so almost 30%, which is we think it's a nice accomplishment already, but yes, nice. But we need an even better pace, because in 2021 we already need to have 50% of our emissions reduced. And the emissions per capita are almost 40%. But well, it gives a perspective of population growth here in the Turku region. This is a region that grows very fast right now. We have a good economical growth right now, and lots of jobs in, for example, the marine industry sector, and lots of people moving in. So the emissions per capita reduced by 40% tells maybe more about the fact how the population growth is developing here in this region. And we gladly also, we are proud to disclose to CDP. So the calculation of our greenhouse gas emissions in our area is completed annually using, well, the best method available, but the emissions are monitored as part of the implementation of city strategy and climate plan, and also reported in accordance with UN requirements through the CDP system. And then we also have our European Union level with our SECAP, and then we have the Finnish level for our CO2 report, where I showed you the pie from. So we have 3 different levels where we actually report our emissions, and we get very valuable information about other cities internationally also through these reporting methods. So it's a very important tool for us as well, and an important network. Well, so a little bit about our climate mitigation entities. So what our climate plan actually consists of. So we have 5 important entities. The first one being a carbon neutral energy system, which takes up, as I said, about 2/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions in the Turku region. And then we have the low carbon sustainable mobility system that we need to develop, and that takes up 1/5 or 1/4 of the greenhouse gas emissions in the Turku region. And then we need to further develop our sustainable urban structure, because it has, well, of course, a large effect on energy and mobility in the entire region. And the Turku City Group also needs to show a front-runner role here. So we have many affiliate companies, for example, in housing that we are working closely with, for example, to create carbon neutral or even energy positive building. And we have several projects ongoing concerning that. And then, as an important 5th entity, we need to strengthen our carbon sinks further. So increasing the Turku area's ability to bind carbon is crucial to our climate mitigation plan, both our climate adaptation and our climate mitigation plan. So we need to also be able to motivate that strengthening the carbon sinks is both a mitigation and an adaptation measure. Yeah, let's go forward, and I will tell you just very shortly about our carbon neutral energy system plans and a few points about what we have included in our climate plan. So our heat, cold and steam and electricity in our region in Turku will be carbon neutral at the latest by 2029. So the Turku Energy Company is owned entirely by the city, and we are working, of course, closely together to reach this target. And also the use of coal, we still have coal in our energy use in our district heating system. So that will be phased out hopefully by 2025. But this is provided that the government participates in the investment costs. Otherwise, it will be by 2029. So there's a coal phasing program nationally that is prepared right now, and if all will go as planned, we will be able to, the front runner cities that want to phase out coal earlier can get this kind of an investment package for that, and then we will be able to phase out coal by 2025. And then the share of renewable energy in district heating is at least 65% by 2021. And this is actually the sector that enables us to have reduced our emissions as a whole 50% by 2021. So that's the most important sector in that sense. And then the share of renewable electricity and heat sold by Turku Energia, the Turku Energy company, is at least 80% by 2025. Yeah, let's go forward. So here we just have a few examples of investments for transition to renewable energy in the last 4 years. So we have a mix of different renewable energy sources used here. We have wind and solar power, wood, wastewater, municipal waste, landfill gas, biogas, industrial loss heat. And we have a new multi-fuel power plant also in Naantali, in a small city near Turku, where we are replacing slowly, or bit by bit and step by step, replacing the use of coal, both for electricity and heat production. And we have a pellet fuel standby built in 2015, and a new wood gasification facility also built in 2014. And on top of these, we also have a heat pump, for example, in Kakola. It's an area in Turku near the center that utilizes wastewater heat to produce both district heating and cooling. And that, for example, corresponds to the heating needs of about 25,000 citizens of Turku. So we have different heat pump solutions also very widely used here. And also we are piloting two-directional heat trade in this district of Skansi in Turku, which is a sustainable housing district in Turku, 4 or 5 kilometers from the center, with 7,000 inhabitants. So we are piloting this two-directional heat trade with a low temperature district heating network there. And just very shortly again about the low carbon sustainable mobility plans that we have in our climate plan. So we aim to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in road and street traffic with at least 50% by the year 2029. And this is compared with the 2015 level, actually. So this comes directly from the national program. So we have prepared this in accordance with the national program. And then the share of sustainable means of transportation is aimed at 2/3 by 2030. And also our public transport system in Turku is set to be a completely carbon neutral service by the year 2029. And already in the Turku city region, or the Turku city area, the public transport aim is to be a carbon neutral service by 2025. So there's another angle to be implemented there. And cycling and walking conditions are improved around the year. We have lots of very good projects concerning that, and yes, citizens in Turku are quite active winter cyclists as well, which we are very happy about. And then I will just focus this last bit on the risk and vulnerability assessment that we made concerning climate risks. While we were preparing our SECAP last year, well, actually, I am quite a new member of the team, so I only came in the fall. But when my colleagues were preparing this risk and this sustainable energy and climate action plan, they also made a risk and vulnerability assessment according to the SECAP model. And here, by climate risks, we refer to potential direct and indirect harm to people, businesses, environment caused by climate, weather, and their development. And this includes both socioeconomic factors and physical and environmental factors. And also the city's vulnerabilities. So, for example, areas in which the city is especially poorly prepared to respond to changes, or, for example, extreme weather events or such were analyzed in this assessment. And the analysis had four different steps. Sorry, just coughing a bit here. So we analyzed the current situation through different national and local reports and expert interviews. It was a very extensive expert interview kind of round was implemented or carried through. And there we also could analyze risks threatening the city and the vulnerabilities of the city. And then we had some expected impacts that we could achieve or just analyze through that. Yeah. So on the basis of these interviews and the reporting, analyzation and the whole analysis, the risks posing a threat to the city of Turku currently and in the coming years were identified. And of course, in accordance with the SECAP guidelines, the current level and the expected changes and a likely time frame was assessed for each risk. Yeah, so here you can see what kind of risks are posed to threat the city of Turku. Some are already visible now, some will be even more visible in the future. So the analysis, as I told you, addresses both climate risks threatening the city, socioeconomic, physical, environmental vulnerabilities, and these outcomes are then used for planning and implementing an effective adaptation policy and measures. So we are quite in the beginning of planning kind of a wholesome adaptation plan. So we have some measures that we have already implemented, but we still have lots to do regarding the whole kind of scope of adaptation and yeah, just assessing the risks. So we have assessed and we know what we almost know, we can assess what we are facing, but we don't have all the measures implemented yet. So we are facing peak heat, peak cold, peak rain, flooding, sea level rise, drought, storms, erosion, forest fires. All of this can be faced in the Turku region in the future, and some already now. Which is interesting, also something important for us to communicate to our citizens and people living in the area, because many people might not see the climate risks in Finland as that hazardous, you know. Many citizens think that Finland might have more benefits from climate change, but well, according to our assessment, that is definitely not the case. So here are some analysis results, just shortly put into a table. You can see the risk level here. And actually, when I told you about how we communicate to citizens about this, so through this assessment, we found out that we have a high risk level in several of these climate hazard types. So for example, extreme precipitation, floods, storms, changes in ecosystem, introduced species. We have a high risk level in all of these. And then, of course, we have an expected time frame from short term to mid-term to long-term analyzed there. And then also as a specific thing for Turku, we decided to evaluate or analyze the reliability of the estimation also, just to have a kind of an angle or a view about how reliable these estimations might be for future assessments as well to be used. So our main risks, as a sum up of this table, our main risks on the basis of the analysis are 1, risks in water bodies and water management, and then 2, risks caused by change in ecosystems. So those are the 2 most important, or yeah, the most important categories here. I might have told you this, everything that says here already, but but let's just jump into these key methods to adapt and increase resilience in Turku. So to answer to these risks and our vulnerabilities in the city, we have 5 entities, or like under our key entity of adaptation, we have 5 different kind of measures or measure entities that we have named in our climate plan. So it's very important to increase information on climate. Citizens don't have enough information about how the climate changes in Turku and what kind of risks we are facing. We need different measures for water management and building. We need to safeguard ecosystems, and we have several adaptation projects that we need to undertake. And also, it's very important to support a sense of community when facing climate hazards. So these are the 5 entities that we have in climate adaptation here. And at the same time, this might be familiar to you who have been in a SecUp process before, but this is just to show our adaptation status and measures, so what kind of scaling we have. So we found out that we are in a pretty good situation regarding our assessing the risks and vulnerabilities, but then, and we have a kind of this, as you can see from the scaling, we have a pretty good situation in all of those, but we need to focus especially on preparing the ground and monitoring, evaluating, and of course implementing the measures. So we have a pretty good status about assessing our risks and vulnerabilities, so we know what we are facing, and now we need to tackle these next categories. And just to conclude here about adaptation status and measures, I took some of our measures from our climate plan here so that you can see what kind of, some examples of what kind of measures we have in adaptation. So well, as we now have analyzed our climate change risks and vulnerabilities quite extensively in Turku, we have certain adaptation measures that already have been implemented, for example, related to runoff water management and underground cabling of electrical power systems and so forth. But however, the consolidating of the overall view of the adaptation measures, so the overall view and coordination remains quite a challenge for us. So that's something that we need to analyze the measures and see if they are extensive enough, and that's work that we have ongoing and that we need to focus on in the future regarding adaptation. And here are some examples from the climate plan. So strengthening our carbon sinks is, as I told you, both a mitigation and an adaptation measure for us. Well, we are now, for example, updating the city's forest plan, and here we need to take our carbon sinks into consideration. And one interesting fact is that our carbon sinks, according to calculations in 2011 actually already, all carbon sinks, both soil and vegetation in the Turku area, covered about 15%. 15% of the emissions in the Turku region. So, well, that's a good situation, but we need to strengthen this more. And for example, the forest that the city owns, owned by the city of Turku, without tree felling, the carbon absorption of the forests already now compensates for our passenger car emissions, which is about 10% of the total emissions in Turku. So that's the carbon sink situation right now. Yeah, but we, for example, we are using a green factor tool in our construction planning, or implementing the use of this green factor tool, favoring soil preserving construction and long-lasting wood products. These are all measures included in the adaptation entity of our climate plan. And Yes, to conclude, we are going to be carbon neutral by 2029, and by 2040 we aim to be a resource-wise Turku, so sustainable use of natural resources, no waste and no emissions by 2040. That is all. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Tiina, for a great presentation. It was wonderful to hear what Turku is doing, and it's very inspiring and ambitious. Let's hope that everything will work out fine. But can you quickly point out one concrete example of your measures that is visible for your local inhabitants as well?
Visible to local inhabitants, you said. I'm hearing
Yes.
a bit, like I have some problems hearing. Yes, well, there are many measures that are visible to the citizens, or there are actually many measures that are maybe not that visible to the citizen, but some measures that are very visible are our improvements in our transport system. So, for example, the great work that the Civitas Eccentric is doing in our city bike system, for example, that's a very visible result, and those kind of measures are the most visible ones. But for example, about the heat pumps in Kakola, the waste purification facility, those are also interesting results that people might not see in their everyday lives, but that we share information about. So how to make district heating more low carbon. So those kind of all sorts of small measures, and small and big measures that the citizens see.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We know we are now over time, but we still have Shirin from CDP to present. So the floor is yours. Welcome, Shirin.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much. Can you see my slides, or do I need to share my screen?
Yes, you need to share your screen. We can't see them right now.
Let me know when you can see it.
Yes, we can see.
Perfect. So thank you so much. And thank you, Tiina, and everyone else on this webinar for the presentation. I'm extremely inspired, as you said, Kristiina, and I really do hope that Turku is going to exist another 800 years with the great action that you are taking and making your city more sustainable and a pleasant place to live. Tiina quickly referred to CDP, so what I was going to do is just give you a quick introduction about the organization and what we're doing, and thereby kind of highlighting a lot of the great examples of climate action and adaptation measures that we've heard today, and bring it into kind of a high-level summary across more than 620 cities, and then talk a little bit about water in kind of in an adaptation and resilience angle, but really focusing on water and what the risks, and also what are the actions that cities are currently taking to reduce the risk. I hope you can see the slides. So perfect. So as I said, as Kristiina was introducing me, my name is Shirin Reuvers, and I work at CDP in the Cities and States and Regions team. CDP is a not-for-profit. We are for more than 3 years now a close partner of the Union of Baltic Cities, and really enjoy this partnership. We run a global disclosure system for city, states, and regions, but also for companies, and the idea is to manage the environmental impacts. Over the past 15 years, we've created a system that has resulted in unparalleled engagement on terms of environmental issues worldwide. And our belief is that only by measuring and understanding environmental impact, it was possible for investors and companies, and of course cities and states and regions, to take action and build a truly sustainable economy. So just a really quick snapshot, in 2018, we had over 620 cities that disclosed to our platform. These cities have disclosed over 8,000 urban sustainability actions, really encouraging to see what's happening. They've demonstrated their commitment to building a sustainable economy and to tackling climate change. I think we're nearing a tipping point in mainstreaming environmental action, and cities are really at the heart of this transition. And it's really great to hear that Turku, Tatu, and many others are already tracking the data that is available in their city. In addition to the cities, there's also over 120 states and regions and over 6,800 companies that answer our climate change questions, but also water and forests. CDP is one of two official reporting platforms for the Global Covenant of Mayors. So that's one of our key partners, as well as C40. And from this year onward, we're working very closely with ICLEI to merge our reporting platforms and ensure that all cities can disclose to one point, thereby reducing the reporting burden. Just a quick overview of how the cities program has evolved. So when we started in 2011, we only had 48 cities reporting their environmental actions. Now we're at over 620. So this is what I meant when I was referring to kind of a tipping point in mainstream environmental disclosure. We believe in disclosure because we know that it works to increase ambition. So we found that around 30% of cities that are disclosing in the first and the second year have emission reduction targets, but when you look at the third year of cities participating, we have almost 2/3 of cities that have emission reduction targets. So it's important to remember that when disclosing your climate action, you are ultimately allowing your city to gain a more comprehensive understanding of how your existing data can help you drive action. So it's really an exercise of identifying risks and opportunities. And when this is done annually, this transformative process can really benefit policy decisions at the local level. And with more and more cities sharing this data transparently, the analysis and feedback that we and our partners can provide becomes ever more important. So this is, oh, sorry, I had a poll question. I don't know if we can still do this. Basically,
yes,
in our, fantastic.
Let's go.
Not only asking about climate change, but we're also asking about water, and this is what I wanted to focus today. So, I don't know if you can see the poll question.
Yes, and we have 50% already who have voted. We'll wait a little bit more so that everybody can submit their vote. A few more seconds. Okay, there we go. Let's see the results. So 88% answered yes, they do see a risk to water supply chain from the climate change, and 13% answered I do not know, whereas nobody answered no. So everybody can identify that there is a risk existing for water supply.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I'm really glad to hear that, because if we actually look at the data that has been submitted to us over the course of the last year, you can see that in Europe there's quite a small percentage of cities who say that they see a risk to their water supply from climate change. And that is a little bit worrisome for us, because we know that there are water risks, and a lot of research has been done. And it turns out that in Europe, water risks are underreported, and that we know we need to do more to ensure that there is a consistent drinking water supply across all cities. But luckily, your members seem to be ahead of the curve, and a good almost 90% do see that there are risks from climate change and that action is needed. So we've been looking a little bit on kind of what cities have reported about the water risk, and we found that the top 3 water risks are declining water. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. We cannot see your slides. They kind
Oh.
of. You have to share the screen again.
Let me have a quick look. Now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, fine. So this was the slide that I was showing, that in comparison kind of to cities globally, there's a small percentage of cities in Europe that see a risk to their water supply from climate change. But it's, as I said, encouraging to see that of all the cities presenting today, that there's a better understanding of the risks that climate change poses. So then this is the next slide I was referring to, with the top 3 water risks that we see, or cities have reported to us, and that's declining water quality. So over 130 cities reported declining water quality as a risk, and of which 80% say that this is a serious or extremely serious risk, and over 50% say that this is a risk actually occurring quite soon, so very much in the short term. And then the second risk is increased water stress and scarcity. So almost 200 cities reported drought as a risk. And I mean, we've seen really hot summers last year, and we see this across the globe, I think. And over 80% said that this is, serious or extremely serious. And about 60% say this is happening in the short term, so not something that is far away from the time frame. And then the third most identified risk is flooding. So over 100 cities reported that flooding is a risk, and again, over 80% say that this is extremely worrisome, so quite serious, and almost 80% say this is something that's happening in our cities now or in the very near short term. So while cities and companies, so both, have identified water security as an issue, it's been challenging for stakeholders to address it. And these risks are not just faced by one city or one company alone, but by all water users in the area. So it's like everyone who is accessing the same water sources. So our vision at CDP is to achieve a secure and sustainable supply of water by 2030, and that's very much in line with the UN's Sustainable Development Goal, number 6, I think, if I'm correct. But the big question is, so who's in charge of water governance? And cities and companies, we believe, will need to substantially increase water recycling and safe reuse of water by 2030, and they will need to change the way they operate to ensure a water secure world. So reusing wastewater poses an opportunity to reduce the environmental impact, but also safeguarding water resources for their cities. And it's great to see that a lot of cities are already taking these actions. However, there's currently a big gap between our vision and the reality, and it seems to be getting worse with rising population, rising demand, and a decrease in supply of water. So this is just an infographic. I know we're running a little bit out of time, so I don't want to get into too many details, but I'm sure Kristiina will be able to share the slides, and we have an infographic showing a little bit more of this, which is a nice way of engaging all the actors that are involved in water, in reducing water risk. So we know that climate change increases the frequency of severe weather events, from droughts to extreme precipitation and flooding, and these affect water availability and water quality. And of course, they're made even more serious by growing populations and increased demand for very scarce water resources. And I feel like in Europe, we sometimes feel like there is enough water, and we are certainly in a better position than in other places, but still in Europe, in many cities, there's only one source of water. If there's anything happening to it, there's a high risk for the population. I think that's something that needs to be mitigated. I have prepared a small example for the City of London just to show how there's more and more demand for cities, but again, I'll skip that in the interest of time, and just talk a little bit about why water is key for generating the new sustainable economy. So we know that water plays a vital role in the transition, and we also know that there are linkages in the water energy nexus, that climate change solutions can have an influence on water demand and water supply. We know that companies and cities must consider the way in which the low carbon activities can be water dependent. So some of the solutions that we're currently coming up with may not work or may have a negative impact on water supply or water demand, and that needs to be mitigated. Some of the emission reduction activities that do depend on or impact the water supply are low carbon fuels, renewable energy, low carbon and traditional energy production, carbon capture, of course, wastewater to energy, water efficiency improvements. So there can be win-win situations, but it needs to be really well implemented to see what is the impact on water. So it shouldn't be left out when we do sustainable action plans or think about what we're going to do to reduce the impacts of climate change. But so what's the solution? And who's going to manage it? That's the big question, of course. So we've been looking at both our cities and the companies we work with, and we know that they are taking action to reduce the impacts of water. And for example, we have over 100 cities and almost 200 companies who say they are investing in existing water supply infrastructure, which is extremely important. They're doing a lot of education on conservation awareness, technology investments to improve water efficiency. They set targets that could be site-specific or citywide. An important point that I mentioned earlier is the diversification of water supply, so reducing the dependence on one water source, and then of course managing stormwater and preservation of watersheds. And some I've just referred today, which really shows that some of the cities that spoke on that webinar are ahead of the curve in actively managing these issues. The most successful actions will be collaborative, so between all our water users, we're then working together to ensure that this is a shared resource. And over 60% of the cities disclosing to us currently already collaborate with businesses on climate change issues and projects, and that's very encouraging. In terms of actions, so what we see is that cities and companies are setting ambitious water targets and goals. Over 50% of companies that are disclosing through our website or our portal have set both targets and goals to better manage water resources. And again, that's very encouraging to see. There is a lot of opportunity to capitalize in terms of recycling and reusing water across cities and companies. In 2016, which is now a little bit, it's already 3 years ago almost, but we'll have the new data soon. Over 300 companies disclosed that they were working on reusing and recycling projects, and I'm pretty sure that this number has consistently gone up since. And then the last action I just wanted to talk about is that it's important that companies and cities work together to invest in water management projects. And I know in UBC member cities, a lot of that is already happening. We know that across the globe, 80 cities are seeking over 9 billion investment in more than 100 water management projects. So there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration with the private sector, but also investors to ensure that there's enough investment flowing into water management projects across the globe. For all of you, of course, I'll share, I'm sure that the slides will be shared. For those cities that are already disclosing to CDP, a lot of this data is available. We have an analytics tool where you can play around and compare yourselves to peers and see what others are doing already in terms of water management, but also across all the climate change projects. There is some corporate data on the platform as well, so you can access that and see what your companies that have a site or the headquarters in your city are currently doing in this regard. And for all those cities on the call today that haven't yet considered disclosing their environmental actions through CDP, you're very welcome to join us. Just reach out either to Kristiina or me. It's entirely free of charge and it's completely voluntary. We will start the disclosing season in April this year, and then we'll run until early July to ensure that you are able to respond to the questionnaire, and then afterwards we'll go back and do a bit more of analysis on the data that you have disclosed and trying to find trends and also provide you with as much support as possible to take the right actions and understand the data that you've been measuring. And I think I leave it at this. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Shirin, for a very, very interesting presentation and from this water perspective, because we really do know that water is so important to us all as human beings, as communities. So it was really interesting to see how this water resilience and water risks actually combine into our kind of strategies and what cities could do better and what they are already doing. And this was really, very interesting presentation, and I would like to thank you on behalf of UBC and for our listeners. And I have one quick question to you as well regarding that. You mentioned that both cities and companies are trying to do the transition to a new sustainable economy in a water-wise. But have you noticed that, is there one leader? Are the cities leading or companies leading, or is it more about the collaboration between the two from the big perspective? If you could.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it really is down to collaboration, and we're trying to work more with all the different actors that are based in certain river basins or that are reliant on the same water supply sources. But it was really interesting, and I think, I mean, obviously the objectives are slightly different. So when a company looks at water supply, it's about continuing operations, ensuring that there's no disruption to the supply chain and to the direct operations. When a city looks at water supply, it's really to ensure that the citizens are serviced well. There's obviously some kind of link. It's important that the economy is thriving. So it's really, in the end, the overall objective is to ensure water supply is given, even even in the case of extreme challenges arising from climate change. And so it's an easy, with the shared objective in place, it's an easy way to collaborate with the private sector, and it can actually only come to really good outcomes and results if you do that jointly rather than in silos.
True. Yes. Thank you for your presentation. And we will be wrapping up soon. But before we do, I have one quick question to both you, Shirin and Marek, if you could join us as well. We have just two of you left since Tiina had to leave already, but I have a quick question regarding stakeholder involvement. Have you, in your cities, for example in Tartu, have you thought about involving citizens and other stakeholders in your climate planning? And for CDP's perspective, that have you noticed that our cities including more like grassroots planning or the people in the climate action plan planning? So who wants to start?
I'm happy to start, unless you want to, Marek. Great. So we've actually, in the data, we've seen that more and more cities are working with the different stakeholders. And I don't know the percentage from the top of my head, but there's a lot of demand. And I think cities are very much realizing that they need to work with the private sector and with other stakeholders to be ambitious. And allow for this kind of massive transition that we need to have. We've been working on one pilot project in particular recently. That's with the City of London, where our headquarters is based, but we're really much looking forward to rolling this out across other cities. And this was a business-city collaboration. It's called the London Business Climate Initiative. The idea was that the city has just launched a plan and a strategy to become carbon neutral, very similar to what Turku has also presented. And they've worked with 11 major companies that are based in London to align their targets between the city and the business. So ultimately, the private sector is now setting targets that help the city to achieve their own targets. And that is the kind of collaboration that we very much want to encourage. And hopefully we'll be able to roll this out. I know Stockholm and many other cities are already having their own programs and plans. Sometimes it can be helpful to have an organization like ours involved, because it gives kind of neutrality and someone who tracks and measures the implementation. And if that's the case, then we're really excited to work with you all.
Wonderful. Thank you for this overview. What about Tartu?
Yeah, it's a really important question of what is the planning stage? Are we planning from up there, down there, or we are growing our plans from the grassroots level up to the administration level? And I am a big fan of the latter. So this is why we have taken this approach to also work closely with the local forerunners to see them as natural leaders of the sustainability movement and the energy transition movement, and basically to use their sort of initiative and this just a good energy that these people and these organizations have internally to push the community, towards more sustainable goals. And we also have dedicated sort of expert teams more focusing on the specific topics, technical topics that need technical knowledge. And our sort of overall framework is using something that is called co-design principle. So we are basically every major strategical decision that we are doing with the stakeholders, encouraging them to come up into the process and supporting them when needed, and also helping them to find their voice in specific part of the process. And also, I mean, the processes that we are talking here are taking several years, and in a modern sort of attention economy, it's difficult to hold somebody's attention for 24 months and expect them to constantly answer our calls or emails. So we are. This is something also we are specifically, these days when people are so mobile that even especially the ones who are more active, they are just not in the country anymore after 6 months. Maybe they are somewhere else doing something else. So it's these questions of plugging people into the process. These are in a focus on trying to make as strategic approach here as possible.
Yes, thank you for the answer. That was really comprehensive and very useful and inspiring for other cities as well, as I believe. But now it's time for us to wrap this webinar. Thank you all participants, our wonderful speakers from Turku and Tartu and CDP. That was a delight to have you here. And if you'd like to contact any of our speakers, please let us know. We have the contacts. And yes, have a wonderful Tuesday, and we will continue our webinar series later on if you're more interested in this topic and some other topics that we are dealing with at the UBC Sustainable Cities Commission. So big thank you once more, and have a lovely spring.
Thank you, Kristiina. Thank you, Marek. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Hello. Tere.